The summit hall was too bright. Anali blinked as she stepped under the halo of light pouring from the crystal spires that formed the ceiling of the galactic chamber. The floors shimmered with mirrored stone. Light refracted off the gowns, scales, horns, and wings of 100 species gathered in tense, formal peace. She kept her head low, her steps quiet, weaving behind the taller, slim delegates in front of her. Her job was simple: translate any sudden dialect shifts, catch unspoken nuances, and stay invisible. That last part she was good at. But today, invisibility was hard. The air was tight with expectation and with fear. She felt it, almost smelled it, coming off the walls like old dust, ancient fear disguised as politics. Every glance toward the center of the room flickered with unease. The humans were already here. They stood beside their table, 6 of them, for silent figures, in matching black suits, a man and a woman dressed like diplomats, their posture serene. The man offered polite greetings. The woman smiled gently at the crystal-headed counselor. But it was the guards that everyone noticed, or rather couldn't stop noticing. They didn't carry weapons, no visible armor, not even datapads or personal shields, just simple clothing. Nothing to distinguish them from anyone else except their stillness. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, psychic, spiritual. It was the stillness of oceans holding their breath before a storm. Anali couldn't stop looking at one in particular. He stood slightly apart from the other 3, positioned to face the room diagonally. Not by accident. His eyes moved with quiet calculation, sweeping over exits, shadows, faces, and then stillness again. His hair was dark, cut close, his skin pale, but warm. His face unreadable, expressionless, not cold, but distant, as if he was thinking 1,000 things no one could hear. And HFY had grown up around warriors. Sleen society was built on power and diplomacy, and power was always expressed with grandeur, heightened voices, flared scales, sharp armor. But this human had none of that, and she couldn't stop watching him. He must have noticed, because his gaze flicked to hers for the briefest second. Just a glance, but her breath caught. There was nothing aggressive in that glance, no curiosity, no warmth, no challenge, just a stillness, not apathy, not absence, but a quiet presence so intense she felt her own heart skip in response. She turned away. Instantly, translator, the Sleen elder at her side hissed. And HFY bowed quickly. Yes, elder, stay alert. The humans speak with velvet teeth. Of course, she replied, though her voice felt a little thinner than usual. The summit began with formalities, endless words in ritual cadence, introductions recited in 10 languages, rotating lights to indicate speaking turns. But even as words filled the hall, attention kept drifting toward the humans. A Gorthithan ambassador made a snide comment about their lack of weaponry. One of the Tharkan drifted away slightly, placing more distance between their envoy and the silent humans. Whispers rippled like wind over water. Anali should have focused on her role, correcting mispronunciations, transmitting context cues. But her attention wandered back to him. She didn't know his name. She wasn't supposed to. She shouldn't be doing this. But the stillness in his eyes wouldn't let her go. At the mid-meal recess, while most delegates shuffled out into the garden hall, Anali lingered near one of the data panels, pretending to check translation logs. And that's when she noticed him, Corin, walking past. Alone. He wasn't supposed to be. The human guards rarely separated, but he stepped with casual purpose toward a far arch, vanishing into one of the peripheral viewing alcoves. It wasn't her business, but her feet moved anyway. She found him near the edge of the glass corridor, overlooking the planet below. Endless clouds swirled beneath them, pale orange light filtering through the thin atmosphere. Anali stepped inside, then paused, uncertain. He stood still, hands clasped loosely behind his back, facing the glass. I shouldn't be here, she said softly. He didn't move. I'm not following you, she added quickly. I know, he said, without turning. His voice was quiet, level. Human accents always carried soft consonants and rounded vowels, but his had a strange depth to it, like echo in a cavern. Anali felt her throat tighten. You knew I was watching? Yes, Silence stretched between them like a drawn string. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you all stand like that? So still, so empty?" Finally, he turned. His eyes met hers. And in that instant, something shifted. His gaze was not empty. It was not emotionless. It was full. Not of power or anger or even calculation, but of awareness. Like he saw her completely. As though her name, her fears, her questions had already been studied, understood, and accepted. Because stillness makes them listen. He said. She blinked. "Who them? You. Everyone. The moment you speak loudly, people try to resist. When you say nothing, they start asking questions they never wanted answered. You're not warriors, no. But everyone fears you. Fear comes from memory, not action." Anali stepped closer. Her voice grew quieter. "What are they remembering?" Corin looked back out the window. The last time they underestimated silence. They stood like that for a long while, not speaking, just sharing space. Shadows and the hum of distant engines. And then, "You're different from the others," he said. Anali stiffened. I'm not." "You didn't flinch. Not like the rest." "I wanted to." He looked at her again. "But you didn't." Anali's breath shook slightly. "It's not strength. It's curiosity. That's all." Corin stepped closer. "Only a few paces now. Sometimes curiosity is stronger than fear. You shouldn't talk to me." She whispered. "It's not proper. I wasn't supposed to talk at all." She blinked at that. "Why did you?" His eyes were gentle now, and tired, and kind. "Because you asked something no one else ever has." They returned to the summit separately. Nothing changed outwardly. She stood behind her delegation, hands clasped. He resumed his post. UNMOVING. But the air between them held something quiet, soft. And when another Gorthathan warrior made a sudden aggressive move during a heated debate, causing a translator from the Siphon world to collapse in fear, Anali's instinct screamed. Before she could react, the Gorthathan's anger flared and Corin was there. He moved without sound, no violence, just presence, standing between the Siphon and the Gorthathan without raising a hand. He said nothing, did nothing, but the warrior backed down, and when Anali caught his eye again, just for a second he blinked, slowly, a silent assurance, and she understood. She wasn't afraid anymore. That night, back in her private chamber, she traced her fingers over the translation logs and tried to focus, but her mind kept returning to a pair of calm eyes, to the silence between them, to the storm that hadn't come but might, if she ever let herself care too much. And yet, in that silence, her heart was no longer still. The ceiling above the grand summit pulsed with quiet light, like the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. Soft, spectral waves of violet and gold drifted across the crystalline structure meant to soothe the delegates gathered below. It didn't soothe. N.A. yelled. He stood just outside the second ring of the great hall, a glass veil separating him from the roar of psychic impressions that clawed at the air inside. Even through the shielding, he felt it, the tension, the unshed fear, the shallow breaths hidden behind polite diplomacy. It was the humans, not their weapons because they had none. It was something else. N.A. yell, being Tharkan, was born with emotional sensitivity. His species didn't speak aloud unless necessary. They communicated in pulses, waves of thought wrapped in sensation. Most species found them unsettling. Nail understood why. Feeling someone else's pain or joy without a word wasn't something the galaxy welcomed. But today, he wished he could turn it off. He stepped toward the barrier again and pressed two fingers against the shimmering field. It vibrated faintly, absorbing most psychic echoes, but even so, one emotion rippled through Colin's stillness. Not peace, not calm, something deeper, stranger, denser. A stillness so complete it erased sound and weight. It was like standing inside a sealed chamber, waiting for an explosion that never came. And at the center of it, she stood slightly apart from the other human guards. Tall, elegant, her body relaxed but alert, her face unreadable, her dark hair pulled tight behind her head, and her presence solid as a mountain beneath still waters. Nail felt drawn, and that scared him. He wasn't supposed to get close. That had been the unspoken rule among the Tharkan. Stay distant. Read only the outer emotional fields, no deep link, not with the humans. But something about her pulled at him like gravity, like an unfinished melody he couldn't stop humming. And when she turned slightly, her gaze brushing the space just beyond the barrier, Neil felt it like a whisper on his skin. She knew. He stepped back. Too fast. He hit a pillar, knocking his data slate out of his hands. It clattered across the polished floor, sliding to a stop just past the shielded entrance. He sighed, bent to pick it up, and froze, because when he looked up again, she was walking toward him. Not quickly, not dramatically, just calmly, stepping out from the hall, past the other guards, without a word. By the time Neil straightened, she was only a meter away. He didn't speak, neither did she, but her eyes held his, not with challenge, not with question, just watching, as if she were measuring something that hadn't yet been defined. Neil's heart thudded. He managed to nod. I dropped this. Her gaze flicked down to the slate, then back up. I saw, she said softly. Her voice didn't match the stillness. It was warmer than he expected. Gentle, not mechanical like some of the others, not devoid of feeling, just careful. I'm Neil, he said, immediately regretting how informal he sounded. She nodded once. Mirail. A pause. Then, to his surprise, she stepped closer. Close enough that their sleeves almost brushed. Close enough that, through the emotional filter built into his uniform, he felt a flicker of something warm. Nael hesitated. His instinct screamed. This was wrong. This was dangerous. He should go. But instead, his hand moved, almost without thought. He reached out to hand her the slate, his fingers brushing hers, and the world vanished. No sound. No light. Just memory. Not his. Hers. In the space between heartbeats, he saw it all. A pale beach beneath twin moons. Her hair loose in the wind. A graveyard of broken ships drifting through an asteroid field. A child's drawing crumpled in her fist. The feel of skin against skin. A whispered name. Someone she had loved. Someone she had lost. Pain, so much pain folded into neat, unspoken layers, and beneath it all, silence, the same silence she carried now. Nael stumbled back. The vision snapped. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. Mirail didn't move. Her expression hadn't changed. You touched me, she said, voice neutral. I didn't mean to, but you did. Her gaze didn't accuse, but it didn't soften either. Nail struggled to speak. I saw something. She blinked. You're Tharkan. He nodded. Then you know, she said simply. It wasn't on purpose. He said again. Still, she didn't back away. Just stood there, letting the silence stretch. He expected her to walk off, maybe even report him. Touching a human guard was not just a breach of etiquette bordered on political suicide. But then, what did you see? He hesitated. A child's drawing. Something flickered behind her eyes. A graveyard of ships. A breath, almost invisible. And a man. You were holding him. She turned away then. Slowly. Nail stepped back. I'm sorry. Mirail paused. He was my partner. Nail froze. We met on the outer moons. Before the war began. The air between them thickened. Not heavy, just deeper. He didn't survive the second blockade. Her voice was quiet, measured. I did. Nail swallowed. And now you're here. We all carry ghosts. She looked at him again. Yours aren't quiet either. That caught him off guard. How do you know? You wouldn't have reached out if they were. They walked a while after that. Nothing grand, nothing formal. Just two silent figures moving through the garden corridor above the hall. And the silence between them changed. It became a place of comfort. Not absence, but understanding. Nail asked gently, do you miss him? She didn't answer for a long time. Then, every day. And yet you remain calm. Stillness doesn't mean peace, she said. It means control. He nodded. And she added, you're not the first to see it, but you're the first to ask. As they returned to the summit hall, the usual gazes followed them, whispers blooming at the corners of the chamber. To figures. 1. Human. 1. Tharkan. 2. Close. To quiet. 2. Personal. Mirail stepped into position beside her fellow guards again. Nail drifted toward his designated seat near the back observation ring. And just before he looked away, she blinked once. Slowly. A signal. A memory. And Nail knew, somehow, that the silence between them wasn't empty anymore, that it was waiting. And he would return. The weight of metal pressed heavily against Vent's shoulders. Not just the ceremonial armor black and silver, edged with glowing runes, but the pressure of what it meant to wear it. Gorthothan warriors weren't just symbols of strength. They were heirs to tradition, bloodlines soaked in conquest, children raised on legends of wars won and enemies broken, enemies like humans. His grandfather had fought them, his father had feared them, and now he stood beneath the same shimmering lights of the galactic summit, watching them, studying them, judging them. They didn't look like warriors, especially her, one of the human guards. She stood off to the side at ease, but not unprepared. Her skin was pale gold under the white-blue lights, and her uniform seemed almost too soft for what she represented. Her hair was braided neatly down her back, and her hands were folded loosely in front of her, like she had nothing to hide, nothing to defend. Say Lenne. He'd heard her name whispered, not by the council, not by his kin, but in quiet corners where fear lived and politics pretended not to. They said she once walked alone into a battlefield before a ceasefire. They said she stood between two warships and refused to move until the captains spoke. They said she smiled once, and 3 generals surrendered. Ridiculous. Just stories. Vent didn't believe in ghosts or myths, only strength. And so, during the 3rd day of the summit, when tensions were high and insults sharper than usual, he stepped forward. "They don't belong here," he muttered. His superior, a graying warrior named Jarek, barely turned his head. "Say nothing, Vent. They don't even carry weapons, because they are the weapon." Vent scoffed. "That's not truth. That's fear disguised as respect. Then let fear teach you." Jarek growled softly, "But don't bring it down on all of us." But Vent had already made up his mind. It happened during a transition break between sessions, delegates slowly filtering toward the lower-level conversation halls, guards maintaining distance. Vent timed it perfectly. He stepped out of his designated zone and approached the human guards. She was the closest. "You." Her eyes flicked toward him, calm as ever. "You know it's forbidden to engage," she said evenly. "So is cowardice." He didn't know why he said that. Maybe to provoke. Maybe to see if there was fire behind her stillness. She didn't react, just turned fully to face him. "You believe silence means fear?" "I believe silence is a shield for those with nothing to say." The other guards didn't move. Only she did. A slow step forward. She was shorter than him. He towered over her. His armor weighed 3 times her entire body mass. His claws could slice through stone. And yet she tilted her head slightly. "What is it you want to say, warrior? Tell me a story." That surprised her. She blinked. "Just once." "What kind of story?" "The one you all keep hiding. The war. The one we never speak of." She studied him. And then, "Come with me." She led him to one of the observation decks high above the hall, behind tinted glass, where diplomats never went and silence could breathe. She didn't speak until the doors hissed shut behind them. Then she stood by the railing, looking down at the swirling clouds over the summit's host moon. "Do you know why we don't tell it?" she asked. "Because it's shameful. Because it's true." He folded his arms, claws tapping against the metal plates. "I'm listening." She turned to him, slowly, and told the story. "We were never meant to win. Our ships were slower, our weapons weaker, our numbers laughable. The council offered us 2 choices, surrender or disappear. We chose a third." Her voice didn't rise, didn't boast. She recited the history like a prayer, slow and steady. "We didn't attack, not at first. We vanished, into clouds, into debris fields, into the forgotten corners of star systems. We didn't fight with strength. We fought with memory. We learned every pattern, every weakness, every habit of our enemies. Then we came back. One by one, silently, we took them down. Not with force, with precision." Vent swallowed. He remembered the stories. His grandfather screaming in his sleep. Ships that never returned. Messages cut off mid-transmission. "But why?" he asked. "Because surrender wasn't survival. It was extinction." She turned fully to him then. "Do you know what I was before this?" He shook his head. "A medic." He blinked. "What?" "I used to carry bandages, not blades." "Then why?" Because the people I loved didn't survive. Her voice cracked just once, barely audible, but it broke something in him. You think we're silent because we're proud? No. We're silent because we remember, and because remembering hurts. He didn't speak for a long time. The light above them dimmed as the moon shifted. She stepped closer to the glass, hand resting lightly on the railing. You wanted a story, she said softly. Now you have one. He stepped forward and gently placed his clawed hand over hers. It was too big, too awkward, but she didn't pull away. Her warmth seeped into his palm, soft, steady. She looked up at him. You're not what I expected, she said. He tried to smile. It came out strange. Neither are you. They stood like that until the lights dimmed completely, until the whispers of war gave way to something quieter, something new, something that neither of them, warrior nor ghost, had expected to find in each other: peace. The Valkyrie rarely felt fear, not because they were immune to it, but because they had bred it out of themselves. Emotion, after all, was seen as a flaw in their ancient houses. Diplomats were trained from childhood to still their pulses, lower their voices, and master the art of calculated distance, and Lirith had been the best of her caste. She stood now in the Western Observatory wing of the Galactic Summit, shrouded in light spun through stained crystal. Her posture was perfect. Her robe of woven ice silk shimmered with hues only visible to certain species. Her expression, flawless, but her heart was not still. It hadn't been since he arrived. The human guard, the one who never spoke. He was always there. Always silent. Always watching. When she first noticed him, Aiden, he had seemed like a shadow, not striking, not tall, no armor, no visible weapon, just a black uniform, and those quiet, impossibly steady eyes. She had tried not to notice, tried not to stare, but every time she turned her head, he was already looking, and not in the way others did. There was no hunger, no assumption, no challenge. Only observation. The kind that stripped lies from bone, the kind that left her Lirith, heir of the third house of Valkyrie, feeling seen in a way she wasn't prepared for. She told herself it was curiosity that was safer even now. As she leaned against the curved balcony railing and watched the guards shift position for the next summit interval, she told herself it was diplomacy. You're a diplomat. He's a puzzle. That's all. But when his eyes met hers again, just for a moment, across the upper level, her throat tightened. He nodded once, not a greeting, not a command. An invitation. She exhaled slowly, then turned from the balcony and walked toward him. He stood by the entryway corridor, his posture unchanged, arms folded behind him, expression unreadable. She stopped just in front of him. Double quotes, I should not be here. He didn't speak. She stepped closer. I don't even know if you can speak. His gaze didn't flicker. But you do listen. Still, no answer. And still she kept talking. Do you know what it's like, she asked, to be trained your whole life to lie so perfectly you forget your own truth? She didn't expect a reply. So when he said, yes, she flinched. His voice was low, rough, like it hadn't been used in weeks, maybe longer, but the word hit her like heat in cold air. He understood. She studied him more closely now, the faint lines at the corners of his mouth, the tension held just below the surface, the slight tilt of his head as he watched her, not like a threat, but a mirror. She didn't know what to say next. So instead, she asked, why don't you speak? He was quiet again. And then, because no one hears what matters, that silenced her. The corridor around them buzzed faintly with the sound of diplomatic murmurs. Distant languages swirled in the echoing domes, but in their small shared space, everything felt still. Lirith stepped to the side, just enough that they were no longer in the center path. Her shoulder brushed the edge of his sleeve. She didn't move away. I keep waiting to be afraid of you. He blinked slowly. Why? Because everyone else is. Aiden's head tilted slightly. His voice was softer now. And are you? Lirith considered it. No. Why not? She didn't have the answer. Not really. So she whispered the only truth she could grasp. Because you don't look at me like I'm made of power or weakness. You look at me like I'm real. He didn't respond. But he didn't look away. The silence between them grew full, not empty, not awkward, full of possibility, full of knowing. When she turned to go, she felt his gaze follow her, not possessively, not protectively, just truly. The next day, during the summit's dusk recess, he was standing beside the crystal garden path outside the conference dome. She found him there. He didn't move when she approached, but this time, she didn't speak first. "What is your real name?" she asked. He looked at her, really looked, then said, "Aiden." She smiled small, barely visible, but it was real. "Lireth," she replied, though it never felt like mine. She sat on the garden bench beside him, not close, not far, and for a long while, they said nothing. They just were, two shadows beneath a galaxy that never stopped watching. Later, when the stars shifted and summit bells rang, she rose. "I'll see you tomorrow." Aiden didn't promise. But he nodded. And somehow, that was enough. That night, alone in her guest chambers, she whispered to the dark. I wanted to fear him. Her voice shook. But he saw me, and maybe, just maybe, that was more terrifying and more beautiful than anything she'd ever known. The final day of the summit bloomed under amber sky glass, and Nari stood at the central dais, her throat dry, her hands steady because they had to be. 1,000 voices from 100 species buzzed behind her. She was the council's chief, interpreter, trusted, perfect in tone, neutral in speech. For years she'd been the voice between galaxies, translating languages, decoding meaning without letting her own heart bleed into the words. But today, her heart was bleeding, because he stood behind the human envoy. Jalen. Agard in name only. One of the silent ones. One of the dangerous ones. One of the beautiful ones. And hers. She hadn't meant to fall. It started with glances, brief, strange flickers during session breaks. A nod here, a pause there. Then came the way he handed her a datapad during a transmission failure, his touch deliberate, his fingers lingering just slightly longer than protocol allowed. She'd translated for hundreds of diplomats. She'd trained herself to hold back, to be the bridge, but never the traveler. But Yelen wasn't like the others. He never demanded her gaze. He earned it. She remembered the first time they'd spoken outside official duties. It had been midnight on the lowest deck of the summit's gravity garden. A false moon hovered above them. She'd gone to clear her mind. He was already there, not standing like a guard, just a sitting, his jacket folded beside him, his eyes fixed on the stars he didn't trust. He'd said nothing at first. But when she sat beside him, he finally spoke. "I thought you would avoid me." She shook her head. "I don't avoid things that make me feel alive." They'd met again the next night, and the next. She learned he'd been born during the tail end of the human resistance era, raised not with pride, but with awareness. He never boasted of Earth, never called it home. Home, he said, was a place where he could choose to be soft. That night, under a canopy of artificial leaves, he let her rest her head against his shoulder. No one saw. No one but the stars. But it couldn't stay hidden. Nothing did here. When the council learned that Nari had shared more than translations with a human guard, the message was clear. You will be reassigned. Your access to human diplomatic quarters will be revoked. Do not make this a scandal. She sat in her quarters for hours, staring at the message. Her heart thundered, because she knew what she had to do. When she arrived at the summit chamber's entrance the next morning, Tafalkari guards blocked her. "You are not permitted entry," one said. Behind them, she saw Yelen already watching her, still and composed. But something in his eyes fractured. She stepped forward. "He is not a threat. You are out of bounds. I don't care." She pushed between them, and he moved. For the first time in his service, he stepped out of line. His orders, his oath broken in a heartbeat. He crossed the marble floor, took her hand. And held it. Before everyone, gasps rippled. Delegates turned. Even the crystal-headed council leader tilted its gleaming brow. "This is highly irregular," it said. "So is love," Nari answered, voice clear. The chamber stilled. "This is a breach of decorum," someone else said. "A guard is not a partner. A translator is not a diplomat. They are not of the same station. They are not of the same species. They are not." "We are," Yelen said, quietly. His voice echoed more loudly than any outburst. "We are." He looked down, at her hand in his. Then at the council. You say we are unarmed. You say we are unreadable. But we feel. He glanced at Nari, and she saw the truth burning behind his calm. He loved her. He would have gone to war for her. But more importantly, he would walk away from everything for her. The council deliberated for hours behind silenced domes. Nari sat beside Yelen on the floor of the observatory wing, her head resting against his shoulder. She whispered, "They'll separate us. They'll try," he said. And that was when she knew truly that nothing could break what they had already chosen. When the council returned, the decision was veiled in neutrality. "You may go," they said. "But not together." Nari stood tall. "Then, we won't go at all." Yelen nodded. And, hand in hand, they turned from the chamber floor. They passed beneath the golden arch of the summit hall. To figures against 1,000 histories. No longer guard and translator. But equals. But love. But choice. They left the station. That night. Together. On a freighter bound for a quiet edge world with no flags, no cameras, and no war memories. They planted new roots, learned new words, and wrote a new language between their fingers, one of touch, breath, silence, not one the council would ever translate, but one the stars would remember.